Hi, my name is Leary. I'm an 18-year-old. I live on Coast Salish lands in Richmond. I'm very excited to be bringing this story. I love reading and performing, and I'm very passionate about Anne Frank's stories, so I'm very excited to share it with you all. Saturday, November 7th, 1942. Dearest Kitty, Mother's nerves are very much on edge, and that doesn't bode well for me. Is it just a coincidence that Father and Mother never scold Margot and always blame me for everything? Last night, for example, Margot was reading a book with beautiful illustrations. She got up and put the book aside for later. I wasn't doing anything, so I picked it up and began looking at the pictures. Margot came back, saw her book in my hands, knitted her brow, and angrily demanded the book back. I wanted to look through it some more. Margot got madder by the minute, and Mother butted in. Margot was reading that book. Give it back to her. Father came in and, without even knowing what was going on, saw that Margot was being wronged and lashed out at me. I'd like to see what you'd do if Margot looked at one of your books. I promptly gave in, put the book down, and, according to them, left the room in a huff. I was neither huffy nor cross, but merely sad. It wasn't right of Father to pass judgment without knowing what the issue was. I would have given the book to Margot myself, and a lot sooner, if Father and Mother hadn't intervened and rushed to take Margot's part, as if she were suffering some great injustice. Of course Mother took Margot's side. They always take each other's side. I'm so used to it that I've become completely indifferent to Mother's rebukes and Margot's moodiness. I love them, but only because they're Margot and Mother. I don't give a darn about them as people. As far as I'm concerned, they can go jump in a lake. It's different with Father. When I see him being partial to Margot, approving Margot's every action, praising her, hugging her, I feel a gnawing ache inside, because I'm crazy about him. I model myself after Father, and there's no one in the world I love more. He doesn't realize that he treats Margot differently than he does me. Margot just happens to be the smartest, the kindest, the prettiest, and the best. But I have a right to be taken seriously too. I've always been the clown and mischief maker of the family. I've always had to pay double for my sins, once with scoldings and then again with my own sense of despair. I'm no longer satisfied with the meaningless affection or the supposedly serious talks. I long for something from Father that he's incapable of giving. I'm not jealous of Margot. I never have been. I'm not envious of her brains or her beauty. It's just that I'd like to feel that Father really loves me, not because I'm his child, but because I'm me, Anne. I cling to Father because my contempt of Mother is growing daily, and it's only through him that I'm able to retain the last ounce of family feeling I have left. He doesn't understand that I sometimes need to vent my feelings for Mother. He doesn't want to talk about it, and he avoids any discussion involving Mother's failings. And yet, Mother, with all her shortcomings, is tougher for me to deal with. I don't know how I should act. I can't very well confront her with her carelessness, her sarcasm, and her hard-heartedness. Yet I can't continue to take the blame for everything. I'm the opposite of Mother, so of course we clash. I don't mean to judge her. I don't have that right. I'm simply looking at her as a mother. She's not a mother to me. I have to mother myself. I've cut myself adrift from them. I'm charting my own course, and we'll see where it leads me. I have no choice, because I can picture what a mother and a wife should be and can't seem to find anything of that sort in the woman I'm supposed to call mother. I tell myself time and again to overlook Mother's bad example. I only want to see her good points and to look inside myself for what's lacking in her. But it doesn't work. And the worst part is that Father and Mother don't realize their own inadequacies and how much I blame them for letting me down. Are there any parents who can make their children completely happy? Sometimes I think God is trying to test me, both now and in the future. I'll have to become a good person on my own, without anyone to serve as a model or advise me, but it'll make me stronger in the end. Who else but me is ever going to read these letters? Who else but me can I turn to for comfort? I'm frequently in need of consolation. I often feel weak, and more often than not, I fail to meet expectations. I know this, and every day I resolve to do better. They aren't consistent in their treatment of me. One day they saw that Anne's One day they say that Anne's a sensible girl and entitled to know everything, and the next that Anne's a silly little goose who doesn't know a thing and yet imagines she's learned all she needs to know from books. I'm no longer the baby and spoiled little darling whose every deed can be laughed at. I have my own ideas, plans, and ideals, but I'm unable to articulate them yet. Oh well, so much comes into my head at night when I'm alone, or during the day when I'm obliged to put up with people I can't abide or who invariably misinterpret my intentions. That's why I always wind up coming back to my diary. I start there and end there because Kitty's always patient. I promise for that. Despite everything, I'll keep going, that I'll find my own way and choke back my tears. I only wish I could see some results, or just once receive encouragement from someone who loves me. Don't condemn me, but think of me as a person who sometimes reaches the bursting point. Yours, Anne. Monday, November 9th, 1942. Dearest Kitty, yesterday was Peter's birthday, his 16th. I was upstairs by 8, and Peter and I looked at his presents. He received a game of Monopoly, a razor, and a cigarette lighter. Not that he smokes so much, not at all. It just looks so distinguished. The biggest surprise came from Mr. Van Daan, who reported at one that the English had landed in Tunis, Algiers, Casablanca, and Oran. This is the beginning of the end, everyone was saying, but Churchill, the British Prime Minister, who must have heard the same thing being repeated in England, declared, "This is not the end. It is not even the beginning of the end, but it is perhaps the end of the beginning." Do you see the difference? However, there is reason for optimism. Stalingrad, the Russian city that has been under attack for 3 months, still hasn't fallen into German hands. In the true spirit of the annex, I should talk to you about food. I should explain that they're real gluttons up on the top floor. Bread is delivered daily by a very nice baker, a friend of Mr. Kleiman's. Of course, we don't have as much as we did at home, but it's enough. We also purchase ration books on the black market. The price keeps going up. It's already risen from 27 to 33 guilders, and that for mere sheets of printed paper. To provide ourselves with a source of nutrition that will keep, aside from the hundreds of cans of food we've stored here, we've bought 300 pounds of beans, not just for us, but for the office staff as well. We'd hung the sacks of beans on hooks in the hallway, just inside our secret entrance, but a few seams split under the weight, so we decided to move them to the attic, and Peter was entrusted with the heavy lifting. He managed to get 5 of the 6 sacks upstairs intact and was busy with the last one when the sack broke and a flood, or rather a hailstorm, of brown beans went flying through the air and down the stairs. Since there were about 50 pounds of beans in that sack, it made enough noise to raise the dead. Downstairs, they were sure the house was falling down around their heads. Peter was stunned, but then burst into peals of laughter when he saw me standing at the bottom of the stairs, like an island in a sea of brown, with waves of beans lapping at my ankles. We promptly began picking them up, but beans are so small and slippery that they roll into every conceivable corner and hole. Now each time we go upstairs, we bend over and hunt around so we can present Mrs. Van Daan with a handful of beans. I almost forgot to mention that Father has recovered from his illness. Yours, Anne. P.S. The radio has just announced that Algiers has fallen. Morocco, Casablanca, and Oran have been in English hands for several days. We're now waiting for Tunis. Tuesday, November 10th, 1942. Dearest Kitty, great news! We're planning to take an 8th person into hiding with us. Yes, really. We always thought there was enough room and food for one more person, but we were afraid of placing an even greater burden on Mr. Kugler and Mr. Kleiman. But since reports of the dreadful things being done to the Jews are getting worse by the day, Father decided to sound out these 2 gentlemen, and they thought it was an excellent plan. It's just as dangerous whether there are 7 or 8, they noted rightly. Once this was settled, we sat down and mentally went through our circle of acquaintances, trying to come up with a single person who would blend in well with our extended family. This wasn't difficult. After Father had rejected all the Van Daan relatives, we chose a dentist named Alfred Dussel. He lives with a charming Christian lady who's quite a bit younger than he is. They're probably not married, but that's beside the point. He's known to be quiet and refined, and he seemed, from our superficial acquaintance with him, to be nice. Meep knows him as well, so she'll be able to make the necessary arrangements. If he comes, Mr. Dussel will have to sleep in my room instead of Margot, who will have to make do with the folding bed. After Dussel arrived, Margot slept in her parents' bedroom. We'll ask him to bring along something to fill cavities with. Yours, Anne. Thursday, November 12th, 1942. Dearest Kitty, Meep came to tell us she'd been to see Dr. Dussel. He asked her the moment she entered the room if she knew of a hiding place and was enormously pleased when Meep said she had something in mind. She added that he'd need to go into hiding as soon as possible, preferably Saturday, but he thought this was highly improbable since he wanted to bring his records up to date, settle his accounts, and attend to a couple of patients. Meep relayed the message to us this morning. We didn't think it was wise to wait so long. All these preparations require explanations to various people who we feel ought to be kept in the dark. Meep went to ask if Dr. Dussel couldn't manage to come on Saturday after all, but he said no, and now he's scheduled to arrive on Monday. I think it's odd that he doesn't jump at our proposal. If they pick him up on the street, it won't help either his records or his patients, so why the delay? If you ask me, it's stupid of father to humor him. Otherwise, no news. Yours, Anne. Tuesday, November 17th, 1942. Dearest Kitty, Mr. Dussel has arrived. Everything went smoothly. Meep told him to be at a certain place in front of the post office at 11 a.m. when a man would meet him, and he was at the appointed place at the appointed time. Mr. Kleiman went up to him, announced that the man he was expecting to meet was unable to come, and asked him to drop by the office to see Meep. Mr. Kleiman took a streetcar back to the office while Mr. Dussel followed on foot. It was 11:20 when Mr. Dussel tapped on the front door. Meep asked him to remove his coat so the yellow star couldn't be seen, and brought him to the private office, where Mr. Kleiman kept him occupied until the cleaning lady had gone. On the pretext that the private office was needed for something else, Meep took Mr. Dussel upstairs, opened the bookcase, and stepped inside, while Mr. Dussel looked on in amazement. In the meantime, the 7 of us had seated ourselves around the dining table to await the latest addition to our family with coffee and cognac. Meep first led him into the Frank family room. He immediately recognized our furniture, but had no idea we were upstairs, just above his head. When Meep told him, he was so astonished he nearly fainted. Thank goodness she didn't leave him in suspense any longer, but brought him upstairs. Mr. Dussel sank into a chair and stared at us in dumbstruck silence, as though he thought he could read the truth on our faces. Then he stuttered, but are you nicht in Belgium? The officer, the auto, they were not coming? Your escape was not working? We explained the whole thing to him, about how we deliberately spread the rumor of the officer and the car to throw the Germans and anyone else who might come looking for us off track. Mr. Dussel was speechless in the face of such ingenuity, and could do nothing but gaze around in surprise as he explored the rest of our lovely and ultra-practical annex. We all had lunch together. Then he took a short nap, joined us for tea, put away the few belongings Meep had been able to bring here in advance, and began to feel much more at home. Especially when we handed him the following typewritten rules and regulations of the Secret Annex, a Van Dan production. Prospectus and Guide to the Secret Annex, a unique facility to the temporary accommodations of Jews and other dispossessed persons. Open all year round, located in beautiful, quiet, wooded surroundings in the heart of Amsterdam. No private residence in the vicinity. Can be reached by streetcar 13 or 17 and also by car and bicycle. For those to whom such transportation has been forbidden by the German authorities, it can also be reached on foot. Furnished and unfurnished rooms and apartments are available at all times, with or without meals. Price, free. Diet, low fat. Running water in the bathroom, no bath, and on various inside and outside walls. Cozy wood stoves for heating. Ample storage space for a variety of goods, 2 large modern safes. Private radio with direct line to London, New York, Tel Aviv, and many other stations. Available to all residents after 6 p.m. No listening to forbidden broadcasts, with certain exceptions, i.e. German stations may only be tuned in to listen to classical music. It is absolutely forbidden to listen to German news bulletins, regardless of where they are transmitted from, and to pass them on to others. Rest hours, from 10 p.m. to 7:30 a.m. or 10:15 a.m. on Sundays. Owing to circumstances, residents are required to observe rest hours during the daytime when instructed to do so by the management. To ensure the safety of all, rest hours must be strictly observed. Free time activities. None allowed outside the house until further notice. Use of language. It is necessary to speak softly at all times. Only the language of civilized people may be spoken, thus, no German. Reading and relaxation. No German books may be read, except for the classics and works of a scholarly nature. Other books are optional. Calisthenics, daily. Singing, only softly and after 6 p.m. Movies, prior arrangements required. Classes, a weekly correspondence course in shorthand. Courses in English, French, math, and history offered at any hour of the day or night. Payment in the form of tutoring, example, Dutch. Separate department for the care of small household pets, with the exception of vermin, for which special permits are required. Meal times. Breakfast at 9 a.m. daily, except holidays and Sundays, at approximately 11:30 a.m. on Sundays and holidays. Lunch, a light meal from 1:15 p.m. to 1:45 p.m. Dinner may or may not be a hot meal. Mealtime depends on news broadcasts. Obligations with respect to the Supply Corps. Residents must be prepared to help with office work at all times. Baths. The wash tub is available to all residents after 9 a.m. on Sundays. Residents may bathe in the bathroom, kitchen, private office, or front office as they choose. Alcohol for medicinal purposes only. The end. Yours, Anne.
Hi, my name is Ashley. I'm 28 years old and Anishinaabe from Treaty 1 territory. And I would like to acknowledge the generous hosts of the land I now live on, the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish people. I love making videos, and I'm very excited to bring Anne Frank's story into your home. Thursday, November 19th, 1942. Dearest Kitty, just as we thought, Mr. Dussel is a very nice man. Of course he didn't mind sharing a room with me. Of course, to be honest, I'm not exactly delighted at having a stranger use my things, but you have to make sacrifices for a good cause, and I'm glad I can make this small one. If we can save even one of our friends, the rest doesn't matter, said Father, and he's absolutely right. The first day Mr. Dussel was here, he asked me all sorts of questions. For example, what time the cleaning lady comes to the office, how we've arranged to use the washroom, and when we're allowed to go to the toilet. You may laugh, but these things aren't so easy in a hiding place. During the daytime, we can't make any noise that might be heard downstairs. And when someone else is there, like the cleaning lady, we have to be extra careful. I patiently explained all this to Mr. Dussel, but I was surprised to see how slow he is to catch on. He asks everything twice and still can't remember what you've told him. Maybe he's just confused by the sudden change and he'll get over it. Otherwise, everything is going fine. Mr. Dussel has told us much about the outside world we've missed for so long. He had sad news. Countless friends and acquaintances have taken off to a dreadful fate. Night after night, green and gray military vehicles cruise the streets. They knock on every door, asking whether any Jews live there. If so, the whole family is immediately taken away. If not, they proceed to the next house. It's impossible to escape their clutches unless you go into hiding. They often go around with lists, knocking only on those doors where they know there's a big haul to be made. They frequently offer a bounty, so much per head. It's like the slave hunts of the olden days. I don't mean to make light of this, it's much too tragic for that. In the evenings when it's dark, I often see long lines of good, innocent people, accompanied by crying children, walking on, ordered about by a handful of men who bully and beat them until they nearly drop. No one is spared. The sick, the elderly, children, babies, and pregnant women, all are marched to their death. We're so fortunate here, away from the turmoil. We wouldn't have to give a moment's thought to all this suffering if it weren't for the fact that we're so worried about those we hold dear, whom we can no longer help. I feel wicked sleeping in a warm bed, while somewhere out there my dearest friends are dropping from exhaustion or being knocked to the ground. I get frightened myself when I think of close friends who are now at the mercy of the cruelest monsters ever to walk the earth. And all because they're Jews. Yours, Anne. Friday, November 20th, 1942. Dearest Kitty, we don't really know how to react. Up to now, very little news about the Jews had reached us here, and we thought it best to stay as cheerful as possible. Every now and then, Miep used to mention what had happened to a friend, and Mother or Mrs. Van Dam would start to cry. So she decided it was better not to say any more. But we bombarded Mr. Dussel with questions. And the stories he had to tell were so gruesome and dreadful that we can't get them out of our heads. Once we've had time to digest the news, we'll probably go back to our usual joking and teasing. It won't do us or those outside any good if we continue to be as gloomy as we are now. And what would be the point of turning the secret annex into a melancholy annex? No matter what I'm doing, I can't help thinking about those who are gone. I catch myself laughing and remember that it's a disgrace to be so cheerful. But am I supposed to spend the whole day crying? No, I can't do that. This gloom will pass. Added to this misery, there's another, but of a more personal nature. And it pales in comparison to the suffering I've just told you about. Still, I can't help telling you that lately I've begun to feel deserted. I'm surrounded by too great a void. I never used to give it much thought, since my mind was filled with my friends and having a good time. Now I think either about unhappy things or about myself. It's taken a while, but I finally realized that Father, no matter how he may be, can't take the place of my former world. When it comes to my feelings, Mother and Margot ceased to count long ago. But why do I bother you with this foolishness? I'm terribly ungrateful, Kitty, I know. But when I've been scolded for the umpteenth time and have all these other woes to think about as well, my head begins to reel. Yours, Anne. Saturday, November 23rd, 1942. Dearest Kitty, we've been using too much electricity and have now exceeded our ration. The result, excessive economy and the prospect of having the electricity cut off. No light for 14 days. That's a pleasant thought, isn't it? But who knows, maybe it won't be so long. It's too dark to read after 4 or 4:30, so while we away the time with all these kinds of crazy activities, telling riddles, doing calisthenics in the dark, speaking English or French, reviewing books, after a while, everything gets boring. Yesterday, I discovered a new pastime, using a good pair of binoculars to peek into the lighted rooms of the neighbors. During the day, our curtains can't be opened. Not even an inch, but there's no harm when it's so dark. I never knew that neighbors could be so interesting. Ours are, at any rate. I've come across a few at dinner. One family making home movies, and the dentist across the way working on a frightened old lady. Mr. Dussel, the man who said to get along so well with children and to absolutely adore them, has turned out to be an old-fashioned disciplinarian and preacher of unbearably long sermons on manners. Since I have the singular pleasure of sharing my far too narrow room with His Excellency, and since I'm generally considered to be the worst behaved of the 3 young people, it's all I can do to avoid having the same old scoldings and admonitions repeatedly flung at my head and to pretend not to hear. This wouldn't be so bad if Mr. Dussel weren't such a tattletale and hadn't singled out Mother to be the recipient of his reports. If Mr. Dussel just read me the riot act, Mother lectures me all over again, this time throwing the whole book at me. And if I'm really lucky, Mrs. Van D calls me to account 5 minutes later and lays down the law as well. Really, it's not easy being the badly brought up center of attention of a family of nitpickers. In bed at night, as I ponder my many sins and exaggerated shortcomings, I get so confused by the sheer amount of things I have to consider that I either laugh or cry depending on my mood. Then I fall asleep with a strange feeling of wanting to be different than I am, or being different than I want to be, or behaving differently than I am or want to be. Oh dear, now I'm confusing you too. Forgive me, but I don't like crossing things out, and in these times of scarcity, tossing away a piece of paper is clearly taboo. So I can only advise you not to reread the above passage and to make no attempt to get to the bottom of it, because you'll never find your way out again. Yours, Anne. Monday, December 7th, 1942. Dearest Kitty, Hanukkah and St. Nicholas Day nearly coincided this year. They were only 1 day apart. We didn't make much of a fuss with Hanukkah, merely exchanging a few small gifts and lighting the candles. Since candles are in short supply, we lit them for only 10 minutes. But as long as we sing the song, that doesn't matter. Mr. Van Daan made a menorah out of wood, so that was taken care of too. St. Nicholas Day on Saturday was much more fun. During dinner, Bep and Yup were so busy whispering to Father that our curiosity was aroused and we suspected they were up to something. Sure enough, at 8 o'clock, we all trooped downstairs through the hall in pitch darkness. It gave me the shivers, and I wished I was safely back upstairs to the alcove. We could switch on the light since this room doesn't have any windows. When that was done, Father opened the big cabinet. Oh, how wonderful, we all cried. In the corner was a large basket decorated with colorful paper and a mask of Black Peter. We quickly took the basket upstairs with us. Inside was a little gift for everyone, including an appropriate verse. Since you're familiar with the kinds of poems people write to each other on St. Nicholas Day, I won't copy them down for you. I received a Cupid doll. Father got bookends, and so on. Well, anyway, it was a nice idea. And since the 8 of us had never celebrated St. Nicholas Day before, this was a good time to begin. Yours, Anne. P.S. We also had presents for everyone downstairs, a few things left over from the good old days, plus Miep and Bep are always grateful for money. Today we heard that Mr. Van Daan's ashtray, Mr. Dussel's picture frame, and Father's bookends were made by none other than Mr. Voskugiel. How can anyone be so clever with his hands is a mystery to me. Thursday, December 10th, 1942. Dearest Kitty, Mr. Van Daan used to be in the meat, sausage, and spice business. He was hired for his knowledge of spices, and yet, to our great delight, it's his sausage talents that have come in handy now. We ordered a large amount of meat, under the counter, of course, that we were planning to preserve in case here there were hard times ahead. Mr. Van Daan decided to make bratwurst, sausages, and metwurst. I had fun watching him put the meat through the grinder, once, twice, 3 times. Then he added the remaining ingredients to the ground meat and used a long pipe to force the mixture into the casings. We ate the bratwurst and with sauerkraut for lunch, but the sausages, which were going to be canned, had to dry first, so we hung them over the pole suspended from the seething. Everyone who came into the room burst into laughter when they saw the dangling sausages. It was such a comical sight. The kitchen was in shambles. Mr. Van Daan, clad in his wife's apron and looking fatter than ever, was working away at the meat. What with his bloody hands, red-faced, and spotted apron, he looked like a real butcher. Mrs. D was trying to do everything at once, learning Dutch out of a book, stirring the soup, watching the meat, sighing and moaning about her broken rib. That's what happens when old ladies do such stupid exercises to get rid of their fat behinds. Dussel had an eye infection, was sitting next to the stove, dabbing his eye with chamomile tea. Pim seated in the one ray of sunshine coming through the window, kept having to move his chair this way and that way to stay out of the way. His rheumatism must have been bothering him because he was slightly hunched over and was keeping an eye on Mr. Van Dam with an agonized expression on his face. He reminded me of those aged invalids you see in the poorhouse. Mr. Peter was romping around the room with Mushi, the cat, while Mother Margot and I were peeling boiled potatoes. When you get right down to it, none of us were doing our work properly because we were all so busy watching Mr. Van Dam. Dossel has opened his dental practice. Just for fun, I'll describe the session with his very first patient. Mother was ironing, and Mrs. Van D, the first victim, sat down on a chair in the middle of the room. Dossel, unpacking his case with an air of importance, asked for some eau de cologne, which could be used as a disinfectant, and a Vaseline, which would have to do for wax. He looked in Mrs. Van D's mouth and found 2 teeth that made her wince with pain and utter incoherent cries every time he touched them. After a lengthy examination, lengthy as far as Mrs. Van D was concerned, since it actually took no longer than 2 minutes, Dossel began to scrape out a cavity. But Mrs. Van D had no intention of letting him. She flailed her arms and legs until Dossel finally let go of his probe, and it remained stuck in Mrs. Van D's tooth. That really did it. Mrs. Van D lashed out wildly in all directions, cried as much as you can with an instrument like that in your mouth, tried to remove it, but only managed to push it in further. Mr. Dossel calmly observed the scene, his hands on his hips, while the rest of the audience roared with laughter. Of course, that was very mean of us. If it had been me, I'm sure I would have yelled even louder. After a great deal of squirming, kicking, screaming, and shouting, Mrs. Van D finally managed to yank the thing out, and Mr. Dossel went on with his work as if nothing had happened. He was so quick that Mrs. Van D didn't have time to pull any more shenanigans. But then he had more help than he's ever had before, no fewer than 2 assistants. Mr. Van D and I performed our job well. The whole scene resembled one of those engravings from the Middle Ages entitled "A Quack at Work." In the meantime, however, the patient was getting restless, since she had to keep an eye on her soup and her food. One thing is certain, it'll be a while before Mrs. Van D makes another dental appointment. Yours, Anne.
Hi, my name is Tila. I was born in the Netherlands and then I moved to Canada at the age of 9. I am 23 years old now and super excited to be reading for you today. Sunday, 13 December 1942. Dear Kitty, I'm sitting cozily in the main office, looking outside through a slit in the curtain. It is dusk, but still just light enough to write to you. It is a very queer sight as I watch the people walking by. It looks just as if they are all in a terrible hurry and nearly trip over their own toes. With cyclists now, one simply can't keep pace with their speed. I can't even see what sort of person is riding on the machine. The people in this neighborhood don't look very attractive. The children especially are so dirty you wouldn't want to touch them with a barge pole. Real slum kids with running noses. I can hardly understand a word they say. Yesterday afternoon, Margot and I were having a bath here, and I said, supposing we were to take the children who are walking past, one by one, hoist them up with a fishing rod, give them each a bath, wash and mend their clothes, and then let them go again, then... Margot interrupted me. By tomorrow they would look just as filthy and ragged as before. But I'm just talking nonsense. Besides, there are other things to see. Cars, boats, and rain. I like particularly the screech of the trams as they go by. There's no more variety in our thoughts than there is for ourselves. They go round and round like a roundabout, from Jews to food and from food to politics. By the way, talking of Jews, I saw 2 Jews through the curtain yesterday. I could hardly believe my eyes. It was a horrible feeling. just as if I'd betrayed them and was now watching them in their misery. There's a houseboat immediately opposite, where a bargeman lives with his family. He has a small yapping dog. We only know the little dog by his bark and his tail, which we can see when he runs around the deck. Ugh, now it's starting to rain, and most of the people are hidden under umbrellas. I see nothing but raincoats and occasionally the back of someone's hat. Really, I don't need to see more. I'm gradually getting to know all the women at a glance, blown out with potatoes, wearing a red or a green coat, trodden down heels and with a bag under their arms. Their faces either look grim or kind, depending on their husband's dispositions. Yours, Anne. Tuesday, 22nd December 1942. Dear Kitty, the secret annex has heard the joyful news that each person will receive an extra quarter of a pound of butter for Christmas. It says half a pound in the newspapers, but that's only for the lucky mortals who get their ration books from the government, not for Jews who have gone into hiding, who can only afford to buy 4 illegal ration books instead of 8. We're all going to bake something with our butter. I made some biscuits and 2 cakes this morning. Everyone is very busy upstairs, and Mummy has told me I must not go there to work or read until the household jobs are done. Mrs. Van Daan is in bed with her bruised rib, complains the whole day long, allows herself to be given fresh dressings all the time, and isn't satisfied with anything. I shall be glad when she's on her feet again and tidies up her own things, because I must say this for her, she's exceptionally industrious and tidy, all the while she is healthy in mind and body. She's cheerful too. Just as if I didn't hear enough shh during the day for making too much noise, my gentleman bedroom companion now repeatedly calls out shh to me at night too. According to him, I'm not even allowed to turn over. I refuse to take the slightest notice of him, and she'll go shh back at him the next time. He makes me furious, on Sundays especially, when he turns the light on early to do his exercises. It seems to take simply hours while I, poor tormented creature, feel the chairs, which are placed at the head of my bed to lengthen it, slide backwards and forwards continually under my sleepy head. When he has ended with a couple of violent arm-waving exercises to loosen his muscles, his lordship begins his toilet. His pants are hanging up, so to and fro he must go to collect them, but he forgets his tie, which is lying on the table. Therefore, once more he pushes and bumps past the chairs to get it. But I won't bore you any longer on the subject of old men. It won't make things any better, and all my plans of revenge, such as disconnecting the lamp, shutting the door, hiding his clothes, must be abandoned in order to keep the peace. Oh, I am becoming so sensible. One must apply one's reason to everything here, learning to obey, to hold your tongue, to help, to be good, to give in, and I don't know what else. I'm afraid I shall use up all my brains too quickly. I haven't got so very many. Then I shall not have any left for when the war is over. Yours, Anne. Wednesday, 13 January, 1943. Dear Kitty, everything has upset me again this morning, so I wasn't able to finish a single thing properly. It is terrible outside. Day and night, more of those poor miserable people are being dragged off, with nothing but a rucksack and a little money. On the way, they are deprived even of these possessions. Families are torn apart, the men, women, and children all being separated. Children coming home from school will find that their parents have disappeared. Women returned from shopping to find their homes shut up and their families gone. The Dutch people are anxious too. Their sons are being sent to Germany. Everyone is afraid. And every night hundreds of planes fly over Holland and go to German towns, where the earth is plowed up by their bombs, and every hour hundreds and thousands of people are killed in Russia and Africa. No one is able to keep out of it. The whole globe is waging war, and although it is going better for the Allies, the end is not yet in sight. And as for us, we are fortunate. Yes, we are luckier than millions of people. It is quiet and safe here, and we are, so to speak, living on capital. We're even so selfish as to talk about, after the war, brighten up at the thought of having new clothes and new shoes, whereas we really ought to save every penny to help other people and save what is left from the wreckage after the war. The children here run about in just a thin blouse and clogs. No coat, no hat, no stockings, and no one helps them. Their tummies are empty. They chew an old carrot to stay the pangs, go from their cold homes out into the cold street, and when they get to school, find themselves in an even colder classroom. Yes, it has even got so bad in Holland that countless children stop the passers-by and beg for a piece of bread. I could go on for hours about all the suffering the war has brought, but then I would only make myself more dejected. There is nothing we can do but wait as calmly as we can till the misery comes to an end. Jews and Christians wait, the whole earth waits, and there are many who wait for death. Yours, Anne. Saturday, 30 January 1943. Dear Kitty, I am boiling with rage, and yet I mustn't show it. I'd like to stamp my feet, scream, give Mummy a good shaking, cry, and I don't know what else because of the horrible words, mocking looks and accusations which are leveled at me repeatedly every day and find their mark like shafts from a tightly strung bow, and which are just as hard to draw from my body. I would like to shout to Margot, Vandaan, Dussel, and Daddy too. Leave me in peace, let me sleep one night at least without my pillow being wet with tears, my eyes burning and my head throbbing. Let me get away from it all, preferably away from the world. But I can't do that, and they mustn't know my despair. I can't let them see the wounds which they have caused. I couldn't bear their sympathy and their kind-hearted jokes. It would only make me want to scream all the more. If I talk, everyone thinks I'm showing off. When I'm silent, they think I'm ridiculous. Rude if I answer, sly if I get a good idea, lazy if I'm tired, selfish if I eat a mouthful more than I should, stupid, cowardly, crafty, etc., etc. The whole day long I hear nothing else but that I am an insufferable baby, and although I laugh about it, I pretend not to take any notice. I do mind. I would like to ask God to give me a different nature, so that I didn't put everyone's back up. But that can't be done. I've got the nature that has been given to me, and I'm sure it can't be bad. I do my very best to please everybody, far more than they'd ever guess. I try to laugh it all off, because I don't want to let them see my trouble. More than once, after a whole string of undeserved rebukes, I have flared up at Mummy. I don't care what you say anyhow. Leave me alone. I'm a hopeless case anyway. Naturally, I was then told I was rude and was virtually ignored for 2 days. And then, all at once, it was quite forgotten, and I was treated like everyone else again. It is impossible for me to be all sugar one day and spit venom the next. I'd rather choose the golden mean, which is not so golden, keep my thoughts to myself, and try for once to be just as disdainful to them as they are to me. Oh, if only I could. Yours, Anne. Friday, 5th of February, 1943. Dear Kitty, although I haven't written anything about our Rose for a long time, there still isn't any change. The discord, long accepted by us, struck Mr. Dussel as a calamity at first. But he's getting used to it now and tries not to think about it. Margot and Peter aren't a bit what you would call young. They are both so staid and quiet. I show up terribly against them, and I'm always hearing, "You don't find Margot and Peter doing that. Why don't you follow their example?" I simply loathe it. I might tell you I don't want to be in the least like Margot. She is much too soft and passive for my liking, and allows everyone to talk her around, and gives in about everything. I want to be a stronger character. But I keep such ideas to myself. They would only laugh at me if I came along with this as an explanation of my attitude. The atmosphere at table is usually strained, though luckily the outbursts are sometimes checked by the soup eaters. The soup eaters are the people from the office who come in and are served with a cup of soup. This afternoon, Mr. Vandaan was talking about Margot eating so little again. "I suppose you do it to keep slim," he added, teasing her. "Mummy, he always defends Margot," said loudly. "I can't bear your stupid chatter any longer." Mr. Vandaan turned scarlet, looked straight in front of him, and said nothing. We often laugh about things. Just recently, Mrs. Vandaan came out with some perfect nonsense. She was recalling the past, how well she and her father got on together and what a flirt she was. "And do you know," she went on, "if a man gets a bit aggressive, my father used to say, then you must say to him, 'Mr. So-and-so, remember, I am a lady,' and he will know what you mean." We thought that was a good joke and burst out laughing. Peter, too, although usually so quiet, sometimes gives cause for mirth. He is blessed with a passion for foreign words, although he does not always know their meaning. One afternoon we couldn't go to the lavatory because there were visitors in the office. However, Beta had to pay an urgent call, so he didn't pull the plug. He put a notice up on the lavatory door to warn us, with "S'il vous plaît, gas" on it. Of course he meant to put "Beware of gas," but he thought the other looked more genteel. He hadn't got the faintest notion it meant "if you please." Yours, Anne. Saturday, 27 February, 1943. Dear Kitty, Pim is expecting the invasion any day. Churchill has had pneumonia, but is improving slowly. The freedom-loving Gandhi of India is holding his umpteenth fast. Mrs. Van Daan claims to be fatalistic. But who is the most scared when the guns go off? No one else but Petronella. Hank brought a copy of the bishop's letter to churchgoers for us to read. It was very fine and inspiring. Do not rest, people of the Netherlands. Everyone is fighting with his own weapons to free the country, the people, and their religion. Give help, be generous, and do not dismay, is what they cry from the pulpit, just like that. Will it help? It won't help the people of our religion. You'd never guess what has happened to us now. The owner of these premises has sold the house without informing Kala and Koophuis. One morning the new owner arrived with an architect to have a look at the house. Luckily, Mr. Koophuis was present and showed the gentleman everything except the secret annex. He professed to have forgotten the key of the communicating door. The new owner didn't question any further. It will be all right as long as he doesn't come back and want to see the secret annex, because then it won't look too good for us. Daddy has emptied a card index box for Margot and me and put cards in it. It is to be a book card system. Then we both write down which books we have read, who they are by, etc. I've procured another little notebook for foreign words. Lately, Mummy and I have been getting on better together, but we still never confide in each other. Margot is more catty than ever, and Daddy has got something he's keeping to himself, but he remains the same darling. New butter and margarine rationing at table. Each person has their little bit of fat put on their plate. In my opinion, the Van Daans don't divide it all fairly. However, my parents are much too afraid of Ro to say anything about it. Pity, I think you should always give people like them tit for tat. Yours, Anne.
We'll see you next time as we continue reading Diary of a Young Girl, Anne Frank. Thanks for joining.